The birthday cake sat perfect on our dining room table, 7 pink candles waiting to be lit. My daughter Emma bounced beside me, her eyes sparkling with excitement as I reached for the matches. That's when my phone buzzed with the notification that would change everything. A group message from my parents flashed across the screen. "We think it's best you step away for now." Before I could process the words, Aunt Dorothy's thumbs up emoji appeared beneath it. My hands trembled as I typed my response, each word deliberate and final. Understood. I'll respect that and step away from the family fun too. I hit send knowing that within hours they would discover exactly what they'd just lost. The truth about the family fund started when I was 17 years old, working the late shift at a diner while finishing high school. My grandmother, Elena, had pulled me aside one afternoon, pressing a worn bank book into my hands. $20,000 sat in that account money she'd saved for decades by mending clothes and selling her handmade quilts at craft fairs. She wanted me to have it for college, away from the rest of the family, who she said would drain it dry within weeks. I remember staring at those numbers, feeling the weight of her sacrifice. But instead of spending it on tuition, I made a different choice. I enrolled in community college, working 3 jobs to pay my way, while that money sat untouched. Every night after my shifts at the diner, the grocery store and weekend office cleaning, I studied investment strategies and market trends. By 19, I'd turned that $20,000 into $35,000 through careful stock picks and bond investments. The transformation happened gradually. I created a family fund account telling everyone it was a collective savings effort for emergencies. My parents, Caroline and Robert, were struggling with credit card debt then, so I made the first withdrawal to help them. $5,000 gone, but seeing their relief made it worthwhile. Soon my siblings Tyler and Madison started asking for help too. Tyler needed startup money for a landscaping business. Madison wanted funds for her wedding. I structured everything carefully, keeping all accounts in my name for tax purposes, I explained. They nodded along, grateful for the help and never questioning the details. What they didn't know was that every dollar came from my investments, my late nights analyzing market trends, my sacrifices. While they went on vacations and bought new cars, I drove a 15-year-old Toyota and lived in a studio apartment, pouring every extra penny into growing the fund. Years passed and the pattern solidified. Family members would call with problems and I would solve them with money from the fund. My Aunt Dorothy needed a new roof. Uncle Marcus required surgery. Cousins wanted help with down payments. Each time they thanked the family fund as if it were some magical entity that replenished itself. None of them ever contributed a single dollar. I kept meticulous records in a leather-bound journal documenting every withdrawal, every loan that became a gift, every family vacation I funded, while being told I couldn't afford to join them. The entries painted a clear picture, 15 years of one-way financial flow. $847,000 given freely with zero returned. The most painful entries were the small notes I'd written beside each transaction, recording what family members said about me during those same time periods. Words like unreliable, struggling, and needs to get her life together appeared frequently, always spoken by those living off my generosity. The irony wasn't lost on me. While they discussed my failures over dinners I'd paid for, I was building something substantial in the shadows. My marketing firm started in my apartment with 1 client and grew steadily. By year 5, I had corporate accounts. By year 10, I was turning down clients. But I kept this success hidden, maintaining the facade of barely getting by because it seemed easier than explaining why I chose to live modestly while funding their excess. Looking back, I realize I created my own trap. The fund became their expectation, their safety net, their reason to take risks, knowing I would catch them. They never learned to budget, to save, to struggle and overcome. I robbed them of those lessons while they robbed me of recognition and respect. The family fund wasn't just money. It became the invisible chain that bound me to their perception of my worth. Thanksgiving arrived with its usual chaos at my parents' house. The dining room table groaned under the weight of dishes I'd paid for through the family fund, though no one acknowledged this fact. I arrived with Emma, my 7-year-old daughter, carrying my signature sweet potato casserole and a store-bought pie because I'd been working late all week closing a major deal for a client. The criticism started before we even sat down. My mother, Caroline, looked at my store-bought pie with pursed lips. "Couldn't manage homemade this year either, Benita," she said, placing it on the counter behind her elaborate spread. "Some of us prioritize family traditions." I settled Emma at the kids' table, smoothing her dress and kissing her forehead. She'd been excited all week about seeing her cousins. That's when my father, Robert, decided to share his observations. "You're too soft with her," he announced to the room, gesturing at Emma with his wine glass. "She needs structure discipline. Look how you let her choose her own clothes. What kind of mother lets a 7-year-old dress herself?" The room fell silent for a moment before my mother joined in. "Robert's right. You can't even manage your own life properly, Benita. How can you guide a child?" I felt the familiar tightness in my chest but forced myself to remain calm. "Emma's doing wonderfully. Her teachers say she's kind, creative, and ahead in reading." "Teachers don't see what we see," Aunt Dorothy interjected, settling her substantial frame into a chair. "A child needs stability. How can you provide that? After your failed marriage, you should be grateful we're all here to support you." The word grateful hung in the air like a challenge. I thought of the $50,000 I'd given Dorothy over the years for various emergencies, all while she vacationed in Florida every winter. My cousin Melanie caught my eye from across the room, her expression uncomfortable. "Speaking of support," Uncle Marcus chimed in, already 3 beers deep, "it's funny how Benita here is our family's charity case, but somehow always manages to contribute to the fund. Makes you wonder about priorities." Laughter rippled through the room. My family's charity case. The phrase burned even though I'd heard variations of it for years. They genuinely believed their narrative had convinced themselves that the fund existed independently of my contributions. The collective delusion was so complete that even presenting evidence might not penetrate it. "At least she contributes something," my brother Tyler said, attempting what he thought was defense. "Even if it's not much compared to what she takes out." I hadn't taken a penny from the fund in 15 years. Every withdrawal had been for them. But Tyler's memory had been conveniently edited to support the family mythology. His wife nodded a long designer purse on her lap, bought with the $30,000 I'd given them last year for his business expansion. "Can we talk about something else?" I asked quietly, seeing Emma glance over from the kids' table. "Don't deflect Madison," my younger sister said. "We're trying to help you face reality. Your life is a mess, Benita. Your business is barely surviving, you're a single mother, and you rely on family support to get by. At some point, you need to take responsibility." The business she referred to had just landed a contract with a Fortune 500 company, but she didn't know that. None of them knew about my real success, because I'd learned long ago that their perception of my failure was somehow essential to their self-image. "You know what?" Caroline stood up, commanding attention. "We've been discussing this as a family, and we've decided you shouldn't host Christmas this year. You're not stable enough for that responsibility. Dorothy will handle it." The culmination of their intervention hit like a physical blow. They'd been planning this, discussing my inadequacies behind closed doors, reaching consensus about my limitations. I looked around the table at faces I'd supported financially for over a decade, searching for one expression of genuine concern rather than judgment. "I understand," I said, finally, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "Emma didn't need to witness her mother's humiliation. You've all made your position clear." The conversation moved on to other topics, but the damage was done. They continued their feast, satisfied with their intervention, never noticing that I barely touched my plate. As we prepared to leave, Melanie hugged me quickly at the door. "Check your phone later," she whispered, then louder. "Drive safe, Benita." That night, after Emma was asleep, I opened Melanie's message. She'd sent a video file. My hands shook as I played it, realizing she'd recorded the entire Thanksgiving conversation. But what made my blood run cold was the beginning before I'd arrived. They'd spent 20 minutes planning their attack, assigning who would say what, strategizing how to break down my defenses. "We need to make her understand her place," Caroline's voice said clearly on the recording. "She's getting too independent, thinking she doesn't need us." The irony was staggering. They needed me to need them even while they drained everything I had to give. The group message would come 3 days later, but Thanksgiving was when I truly understood that my family's love was conditional on my perceived weakness. The morning after receiving the group message, I sat in my home office reviewing documents the family had never seen. The early morning light filtered through windows overlooking a view I'd worked years to afford, though my family believed I rented a cramped apartment on the wrong side of town. This deliberate deception had become second nature, protecting my success from their toxic assumptions. My laptop displayed the portfolio I'd built from that initial $20,000 seed. The current value read $3.2 million across diversified investments, stock positions in companies I'd researched obsessively, bond holdings providing steady income, 3 rental properties purchased through Serenity Holdings, LLC, a company name chosen for the peace I'd hoped to find. The first property had been a foreclosure in Riverside Heights, bought 5 years ago when the market dipped. I'd spent weekends renovating it myself, learning to tile bathrooms from YouTube videos and refinish hardwood floors through trial and error. Now it generated $4,000 monthly from a lovely retired couple who sent Christmas cards thanking me for maintaining their home so well. The second property came 2 years later, a duplex near the university where I'd once cleaned offices. Student tenants provided steady income and reminded me of my own journey. The third, my proudest achievement, was a restored Victorian in the historic district. I'd fallen in love with its bones despite the sagging porch and overgrown garden. 6 months of restoration had transformed it into a showpiece that commanded premium rent from a young professional family. Beyond real estate, my marketing firm Ascent Strategies occupied 2 floors in a downtown high-rise. 22 employees worked under my leadership, though I'd trained them to refer to me as a consultant rather than owner when speaking publicly. Our client list included major corporations seeking digital transformation. The contract I'd signed last week would bring in $2 million over 3 years. My personal living situation reflected none of this wealth. The modest 2-bedroom house where Emma and I lived cost less than what most people assumed I could afford. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, reliable and unremarkable. Designer clothes held no appeal when Target provided everything I needed. This camouflage had become so complete that even I sometimes forgot the truth of my circumstances. The most painful deception involved my family's financial struggles. 5 years ago, my parents faced foreclosure on their mortgage. They'd refinanced repeatedly, each time extracting equity for vacations and luxuries they couldn't afford. I couldn't bear watching them lose the home where I'd grown up, so I arranged an anonymous payment through their bank. The mortgage was satisfied in full with documents showing a processing error in their favor. They celebrated their good fortune for months, never questioning the unlikely windfall. Similar invisible interventions peppered my family's history. Tyler's son attended private school through a scholarship I'd secretly funded. Madison's business loan approval came because I'd guaranteed it behind the scenes. Cousins received anonymous gifts during hardships always attributed to distant relatives or lottery tickets. I'd become a ghost benefactor present in their success, but invisible in their gratitude. The irony deepened when I discovered my family's perception of my finances. Last month, my ex-husband Nathan called with an unusual request. My parents had contacted him claiming I was in desperate financial straits. They'd asked him to help support Emma and me, painting a picture of near destitution. Nathan, confused because he knew about my business success, wanted to verify their claims. "They said you're about to lose your house," he'd explained, bewilderment clear in his voice. "Your mother was crying, saying they couldn't help because they're stretched thin themselves. What's going on, Benita?" That conversation illuminated the depth of their delusion. While spending money I'd provided, they'd constructed an alternate reality where I teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. This fiction served their needs, justifying their condescension and reinforcing their savior complex. They needed me to be struggling more than they needed truth. My financial documents told a different story. Tax returns showed steady business growth year after year. Investment statements reflected careful planning and consistent returns. Bank accounts held sufficient reserves for any emergency. The family fund they revered was merely overflow from my actual wealth, a fraction of what I'd accumulated through discipline and strategic thinking. But perhaps the most valuable asset wasn't monetary. My reputation in the business community stood solid as granite. Clients trusted me because I delivered results. Employees respected me because I led with integrity. Professional peers sought my advice because my strategies worked. This invisible wealth of credibility and connections was worth more than any bank balance, yet my family saw only what their narrative allowed. Tonight, as I prepared to dismantle the family fund, I pulled out a folder marked Future Plans. Inside lay blueprints for a women's entrepreneurship center, a dream project combining education mentorship and seed funding for those walking paths similar to mine. The building had already been purchased through another LLC. The programs were designed. All that remained was freeing myself from the emotional and financial drain of ungrateful relatives. The fortune they never knew existed would finally serve its true purpose, lifting others who appreciated the hand extended to help them climb. My phone started buzzing at 5:43 in the morning. The display showed 47 missed calls by the time I picked it up, mostly from family members who rarely contacted me unless they needed money. I set it aside and continued making breakfast, cracking eggs into a pan, while Emma slept peacefully upstairs. The first voicemail came from my mother, her tone progressing through distinct emotional stages. "Benita, sweetie, there seems to be some confusion with the bank. Call me back." 10 minutes later, "This is getting ridiculous. The mortgage payment bounced. Fix this immediately." By the third message, "How dare you play games with our home? Your father is having chest pains from the stress." I plated scrambled eggs and toast, adding strawberries in the shape of a smile on Emma's plate. The kitchen filled with the aroma of fresh coffee as more notifications flooded my phone. Text messages accumulated like digital panic attacks, each more desperate than the last. Tyler's messages started professionally. "Hey sis, quick question about the fund. The private school payment for Jake didn't process. Can you check on that?" 20 minutes later, his tone shifted. "This isn't funny anymore. They're threatening to not let Jake attend classes tomorrow. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it." Madison's texts revealed her business credit card had been frozen. The family plan cell phones had disconnected one by one, starting with the lines I'd added for cousins and extending family. My father discovered his country club membership was declined when he attempted to schedule his regular Thursday golf game. The humiliation in his voice message was palpable. "Benita, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this behavior is unacceptable. Men in my position can't have their membership declined. Do you understand the embarrassment? Fix this before permanent damage is done to my reputation." I sipped my coffee, marveling at his concern for reputation, while he'd spent years damaging mine. Emma padded into the kitchen, rubbing sleepy eyes, and I helped her into her chair. "Morning sunshine, ready for waffles after eggs." "Can we make them shaped like hearts?" she asked, already brightening. "Of course we can." My phone continued its symphony of distress. Aunt Dorothy's messages grew increasingly frantic as her various automatic payments failed. The gym membership, the meal delivery service, the premium cable package, all requiring immediate attention. She'd attempted to access the family fund directly, discovering what I'd always told them, but they'd never absorbed, only I had authorization. The most interesting development came via email from my assistant Sarah. She'd forwarded a message with a note, "You need to see this immediately." The original email showed correspondence between my parents and the bank demanding access to the family's shared account and claiming I was holding their money hostage. The bank's response was professionally clear. The account was solely in my name, had always been solely in my name, and they had no legal standing to access it. Caroline's follow-up calls grew increasingly hysterical. The bank says it's only your account. That's impossible. We've all been contributing for years. This is theft, Benita. Theft from your own family. The delusion was so complete she genuinely believed her own fiction. In 15 years, not one of them had deposited a single dollar, yet they'd convinced themselves of shared ownership. The fund had become communal property in their minds, my contributions forgotten in their revisionist history. Uncle Marcus left a message that made me laugh despite everything. Your little tantrum is affecting everyone. My boat payment bounced. Do you know what that means? They could repossess it. A man works his whole life for simple pleasures, and his niece destroys it over petty grudges. The boat he'd purchased last year cost $70,000. I'd funded it entirely through the family fund when he claimed it was for his mental health after retirement. He'd taken me on it exactly once, spending the trip explaining how I should be more ambitious like him. By 8 o'clock, the calls shifted to group coordination. They were planning an emergency family meeting demanding my immediate attendance. The location would be my parents' house, neutral ground in their minds, despite me paying off the mortgage. Various relatives chimed in with their availability, treating this like a crisis, requiring full mobilization. Emma and I made heart-shaped waffles while their panic escalated. She chattered about her school project on butterflies, blissfully unaware of the family dramatics unfolding on my silenced phone. This peaceful morning routine was what they'd called inadequate parenting, yet her happiness radiated stronger than any of their children's. "Mommy, why does your phone keep lighting up?" she asked, noticing the constant screen illumination. "Just work stuff, baby. Nothing important right now. Tell me more about monarch butterflies." She launched into enthusiastic explanation while I mentally calculated the financial impact of my decision. The automatic payments I'd canceled totaled approximately $42,000 monthly. Health insurance premiums for extended family mortgage payments, for siblings' business expenses, for failed ventures, lifestyle maintenance for those who'd never learned budgeting. The shock of sudden financial responsibility would force realizations that years of gentle warnings hadn't achieved. Sarah forwarded another email that stopped me mid-waffle flip. My parents had attempted to access the family fund at a different branch, claiming identity theft and demanding emergency access. They'd brought Tyler as a witness to verify the account's existence and their rightful ownership. The bank security had nearly called police before a manager recognized the situation and explained again that only the account holder could access funds. The description of my father's reaction, red-faced and shouting about lawsuits, painted a clear picture. They were discovering that their assumed wealth was actually my wealth, their safety net, my creation, their lifestyle, my gift. The cognitive dissonance must be staggering for people who'd spent years calling me their charity case. Emma finished breakfast and ran upstairs to get dressed for school. In her absence, I finally played the most recent voicemail from Caroline. Her voice had shifted to something I'd never heard before: fear. "Benita, please. I don't understand what's happening. Everything is falling apart. Your father is talking about second mortgages. Tyler might lose his business. Madison's in tears. Whatever we did, we can fix it. Just please answer your phone. Please." For the first time in 15 years, my mother was experiencing what I'd felt every month in my 20s, juggling bills and responsibilities while building something from nothing. The difference was she had family she could call for help. Whether that family would answer remained to be seen, but I suspected the group message had already provided that answer. The conference room at Hartwell & Associates smelled of leather and old money, a fitting atmosphere for dismantling 15 years of financial entanglement. My lawyer, Janet Hartwell, sat across from me with files spread between us like evidence in a crime scene. To her left, my accountant David Chen methodically organized documents that told a story I'd lived but never fully confronted. "Every transaction is here," David said, adjusting his glasses as he pulled out a bound report. "You've been remarkably thorough in your documentation, Benita. Most people don't keep such detailed records of family gifts." I remembered starting the leather journal on my 21st birthday, naive enough to think I was tracking loans that would be repaid. Each entry written in careful blue ink noting date, amount, recipient, and stated purpose. The early entries showed hope. The later ones revealed resignation. Let's start with the total. Janet said, her voice professional but tinged with something like awe. $847,000 over 15 years. That's not including the mortgage payoff you arranged anonymously or the education funds you've been feeding. The numbers sat heavy in the room. David spread out tax documents showing how various family members had handled these gifts. The irony was palpable in black and white. My parents had claimed the mortgage payoff as debt forgiveness on their taxes. Tyler had written off business losses funded entirely by my gifts. Madison had structured her wedding expenses as charitable donations from the family fund. What's particularly interesting, David continued pulling out highlighted bank statements, is that while claiming these tax benefits, your family members have simultaneously maintained that this was communal money. Can't have it both ways legally. Janet leaned forward, her expression sharpening like a prosecutor building a case. More concerning is this pattern of requests. She produced a timeline showing escalating demands over the years. What started as emergency assistance became expected monthly support. The legal term would be financial dependence deliberately cultivated. I studied the timeline, seeing my life mapped in withdrawals. $25,000 when Tyler's first business failed. $40,000 for Madison's dream wedding. $15,000 quarterly for my parents' lifestyle maintenance. $10,000 here, $5,000 there, death by 1,000 cuts to my financial future. Now let's discuss your Aunt Dorothy. Janet's tone shifted to something darker. David discovered some interesting discrepancies. David pulled out a separate folder marked with red tabs. Your grandmother Elena's estate was valued at $400,000 when she passed 5 years ago. Dorothy, as executor, reported it as $100,000. The missing $300,000 appears to have been absorbed into various personal accounts. My stomach dropped. I'd been covering Dorothy's supposed emergencies for years, never knowing she'd stolen from the grandmother who'd given me my start. Each request for help had been fraud layered upon fraud, my generosity enabling her crime. We have enough evidence to pursue criminal charges, Janet stated flatly. The question is whether you want to involve law enforcement. I thought of Emma, of the family drama that would unfold of Dorothy's grandchildren who had nothing to do with her choices. Let me think about it. What else did you find? David produced individual summaries he'd prepared for each family member. The documents showed clear patterns of financial dependence, tax implications of their gifts, and projections of their situations without my support. The numbers were sobering. Your brother Tyler's landscaping business has never turned a profit, David explained. It exists entirely on your quarterly infusions. Without them, bankruptcy within 60 days. Madison's boutique is similar, he continued. The rent you've been paying exceeds her gross sales. She's essentially playing store with your money. Janet pulled out her laptop, showing a presentation she'd prepared. I recommend sending these summaries to each family member. Let them see exactly how much they've taken while contributing nothing. The psychological impact alone might be worth more than any legal action. The summaries were devastating in their simplicity. Each one showed total money received, frequency of requests, tax benefits claimed, and a simple line at the bottom, total contributions to family fund 0.0. There's one more thing, David said quietly. He pulled out a final document. I ran a projection of what your net worth would be if you'd invested that $847,000 in index funds over the same period. The number made me close my eyes. Over $2 million in opportunity cost. $2 million that could have secured Emma's future, funded my entrepreneurship center immediately, or simply provided the freedom to live without constant family financial drama. I'd like to add something to each summary, I said, finally. A note about what that money actually cost me. Not guilt-tripping, just facts. The vacations I didn't take, the house I didn't buy until last year, the therapy I couldn't afford while funding their luxuries. Janet nodded approvingly. We'll draft it carefully. Factual, not emotional. The facts are damning enough. We spent 3 hours crafting individual packages for each family member. Tyler's included copies of every business loan I'd covered, annotated with his social media posts from the same periods, showing expensive vacations. Madison's contained her wedding expenses alongside her public comments about my sad single mother life. My parents' package was the thickest documenting systematic financial support, while they told others I was their burden. When do you want to send these? Janet asked. After the family meeting, they're planning, I decided. Let them show their true colors first, then provide the evidence that contradicts whatever narrative they create. David began calculating the tax implications of formally dissolving the family fund. The money would return to my primary accounts available for the Entrepreneurship Center and Emma's future. No more automatic payments, no more emergency withdrawals, no more enabling disguised as love. One last thing, Janet said as we prepared to leave. Given the amounts involved and the pattern of behavior, you might want to consider a restraining order if they escalate. Financial abuse often intensifies when the money stops flowing. I signed the necessary paperwork to begin the formal dissolution process. Each signature felt like cutting an invisible chain. The meeting at my parents' house would likely be hostile, but I'd walk in with documentation that transformed their fiction into exposed truth. You know what the hardest part is? I asked Janet as we gathered our things. I would have given them even more if they'd just shown genuine appreciation, if they'd seen me as successful and chosen to celebrate that instead of needing me to be their failure. Janet's expression softened. Family financial abuse is particularly painful because it comes wrapped in obligation and love. You're not the first successful woman to hide her achievements to maintain family harmony. You're just one of the brave ones choosing to stop. As I left the office, my phone showed 18 more missed calls. The family meeting was scheduled for tomorrow evening. They expected contrition apologies and restored cash flow. Instead, they'd receive truth wrapped in legal documentation and the natural consequences of their choices. The audit trail had revealed more than numbers. It exposed a pattern of exploitation masquerading as family bond, financial vampirism dressed as love. Tomorrow, the bleeding would stop. My parents' house looked different when you knew you'd paid for its continued existence. The familiar blue shutters, the wraparound porch where I'd played as a child, the garden my mother tended with flowers bought on the credit cards I'd paid off repeatedly. I parked my Honda beside Tyler's new truck and Madison's BMW, both purchased with money they'd mysteriously found after large family fund withdrawals. Janet waited in her Mercedes, having insisted on accompanying me. Document everything, she'd reminded me. If it escalates, we leave immediately. The small recording device in my purse felt like armor against whatever awaited inside. Emma was safe at her friend's house for a sleepover, protected from the family drama about to unfold. I'd kissed her goodbye with promises of pancakes tomorrow, maintaining her innocent world while mine prepared for battle. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, her face a mixture of anger and something I'd never seen before: uncertainty. "Finally," she said, stepping aside. "Everyone's waiting." The living room was packed. Parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, who rarely appeared except for holidays and financial needs. They'd arranged the furniture in a semicircle facing one chair clearly meant for me, an intervention setup designed for maximum pressure. "I brought my lawyer," I announced before sitting. "This is Janet Hartwell." The room erupted. "Lawyer. This is family business. How dare you?" The cacophony of outrage confirmed my decision to bring professional support. My father stood attempting to restore order. "Benita, this dramatic gesture is unnecessary. We're here to discuss your recent behavior and its impact on the family." I sat in the designated chair, Janet beside me, and waited. Let them make their case, first reveal their delusions completely before I presented reality. Tyler started, his face flushed with indignation. "You've destroyed my business. The equipment rental bounced contracts are in jeopardy. 5 years of building my reputation gone because of your tantrum. Your business exists entirely on quarterly payments from the family fund. I responded calmly. $48,000 annually for 5 years. Total contributions from you to the fund 0. Madison jumped in tears already flowing. How can you be so cold? My store is everything to me. You're destroying my dream out of spite. I pulled out my phone showing her Instagram post from last week. This shows you in Cabo. The trip cost $8,000 according to your posts. The same week you asked for emergency rent money for the store. That's different, she protested. I needed that vacation for mental health. Dorothy's voice cut through authoritative and accusatory. Enough excuses. You've stolen from all of us. That fund belongs to the family, not to you personally. We demand immediate restoration of access. Janet spoke for the first time. Actually, Mrs. Patterson, the account has always been solely in Ms. Williams' name. We have 15 years of bank documentation confirming this. Any perception of joint ownership exists only in your collective imagination. The room fell silent for a moment before erupting again. Accusations flew like shrapnel. I was selfish, ungrateful, destroying family unity. The irony of being called selfish by people who'd taken nearly $1 million without contributing a cent wasn't lost on anyone with functioning logic. Then my grandmother, Martha, spoke from her wheelchair in the corner where everyone had forgotten her. 40 years of this family's nonsense, and finally someone with backbone. All heads turned to her. Martha, supposedly deep in dementia, looked perfectly lucid and thoroughly disgusted. You all assumed I'd lost my mind, she continued, voice stronger than it had been in years. Easier to ignore the old woman than face what she might see. But I've watched every bit of this disgusting display. Caroline stepped forward. Mother, you're confused. The medication you've been pushing to keep me quiet. Martha's laugh was bitter. I've been spitting out half those pills for 2 years. Wanted to see which of you would visit without wanting something. The revelation shifted the room's energy. Family members exchanged panicked glances, mentally reviewing their recent interactions with Martha. Only one person visited just to visit. Martha continued, pointing a gnarled finger at me. Benita came every Sunday bringing Emma reading books, sharing lunch, never asked for money, never complained about her burdens, just sat with an old woman everyone else had written off. Dorothy's face went pale. Mother, you don't understand the full situation. I understand you've been stealing from my estate, Martha interrupted. $300,000, Dorothy. Did you think I wouldn't notice because you declared me incompetent? The accusation landed like a bomb. Family members stepped away from Dorothy, instinctively self-preservation, overriding loyalty. That's a lie, Dorothy sputtered. I've managed everything perfectly. I pulled out the forensic accounting report David had prepared. Every transaction is documented. The missing money coincides perfectly with your renovation, your cruises, your grandchildren's private school tuition. Janet added, We've prepared a full report for the authorities. Fraud, elder abuse, embezzlement. The charges are substantial. The room devolved into chaos. Tyler accused Madison of taking more than her share. Caroline blamed Robert for enabling Dorothy. Uncle Marcus tried to claim ignorance, while his wife demanded to know why their boat payments had stopped. Old resentments surfaced, like toxic waste years of buried grievances erupting in spectacular fashion. Through it all, Martha watched with satisfaction. $8 million, she announced during a brief lull. That's what I'm actually worth, not the pittance Dorothy reported. $8 million in property investments and cash. The number stunned them into temporary silence. Calculating eyes darted around the room, already dividing theoretical inheritances. Already changed my will, Martha continued. Lawyers finished it last month. Everything goes to Benita and Emma, every last penny. The explosion of protest was immediate and deafening. Threats of lawsuits, claims of undue influence, accusations of manipulation. The family that had moments ago been turning on each other, unified in their outrage at being disinherited. I stood gathering my documentation. The family fund is dissolved. The bank has been instructed to reject any attempts to access it. The automatic payments you've lived on are canceled permanently. My financial support of this family ends today. "You can't do this," Caroline shrieked. "We're your parents. You owe us." "I owe you nothing." I interrupted, my voice carrying 15 years of suppressed truth. "I've given you everything while being treated as your failure. The charity case you created in your minds has been funding your lives while you insulted her at every opportunity." Janet stood with me. "We have one more matter. Mr. Williams, would you like to explain the second family you've been supporting in Colorado? The one funded by money from the family fund?" The final bombshell detonated. Caroline turned to Robert with horror. His face drained of color as he stammered denials that convinced no one. I walked out while the family imploded behind me, their screaming voices muffled by the closing door. In the driveway, a man I didn't recognize approached the private investigator I'd hired to verify David's discoveries. "Your father has been living a double life for 12 years, he confirmed quietly. "Wife, 2 kids, house in Denver, all funded by withdrawals from your account. I have photos, documents, everything you need." Behind us, something crashed inside the house. The sounds of family unity shattering like expensive china barely registered. I'd spent 15 years building their house of cards with my money and silence. Tonight, I'd simply stop protecting them from the wind. The chaos in the house reached new heights after my father's secret was exposed. I stood in the driveway, but through the windows, I could see family members gesturing wildly, voices carrying through the walls. Janet suggested we leave, but something made me hesitate. Martha was still in there, and despite everything, I worried about her being caught in the crossfire. "I'm going back for my grandmother," I told Janet. "She doesn't deserve to be trapped in that." We re-entered to find the living room in complete disarray. Caroline was throwing Robert's golf trophies at him while he dodged behind furniture. Dorothy sat frozen, calculating how Martha's revelation affected her own criminal exposure. The cousins had formed camps, some demanding their rightful share of Martha's millions, others trying to distance themselves from Dorothy's crimes. Martha sat serene in her wheelchair, watching it all with the satisfaction of someone whose patience had finally been rewarded. When she saw me, her face lit up with genuine warmth. "There's my real granddaughter," she said loud enough to cut through the noise. "Come here, sweetheart." I knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her weathered hands in mine. The room gradually quieted, everyone wanting to hear what the newly revealed millionaire might say. You thought I was gone." Martha addressed the room, her voice carrying surprising strength. "Easier to believe than accepting what your behavior looked like to someone watching clearly. The pills Dorothy gave me, claiming they were for my own good. The conversations you had in front of me, dividing my assets while I still breathed. The visits that only came with requests for money." She squeezed my hand before continuing. "But Benita came every Sunday without fail. Read me poetry, brought her daughter to paint watercolors with me. Never mentioned money, never complained about the burdens you all placed on her shoulders. She didn't know I was lucid. Her kindness was real." Tyler stepped forward, trying to salvage something. "Grandma, we didn't know you were struggling with the medication. We trusted Dorothy." "You trusted greed," Martha interrupted. "Every one of you knew something was wrong when my supposed net worth dropped by 75% overnight, but you stayed quiet because Dorothy's theft meant more money flowing to you through Benita's fund." The truth hung heavy in the air. They'd all been complicit, turning blind eyes to obvious fraud because challenging it might interrupt their cash flow. Martha pulled out a manila envelope from her wheelchair's side pocket. "Speaking of truth, let me share some recordings my aide helped me make. Amazing what phones can do these days." She handed me the envelope with a small digital recorder inside. I pressed play, and Dorothy's voice filled the room from 2 years ago. The old bat's finally losing it. Once we get power of attorney, we'll move the assets before anyone notices. Benita's too naive to check the estate properly. Other voices joined the recording. Tyler discussing how to hide Martha's true net worth from me. Madison suggesting they increase Martha's medication to speed up the process. Caroline lamenting that her mother was too healthy and might live another decade. "You recorded us," Dorothy's voice cracked with panic. "Every visit for 2 years," Martha confirmed. "My aide Rosanna is very tech-savvy. We have hours of material. Especially interesting are the conversations about having me declared incompetent to access my money faster." I felt sick listening to my family plan Martha's financial destruction, while she sat trapped in fake dementia. The recordings continued, each revelation worse than the last. They'd researched facilities to put her in the cheapest ones possible. They discussed selling her house, dividing profits before she was even gone. "The truly pathetic part," Martha said as I stopped the recording, "is that you could have had it all legitimately. I was prepared to leave generous inheritances to everyone. But watching how you treated the one person who showed genuine love, that changed everything." She turned to me with eyes suddenly wet with tears. "You saved me, Benita. Not with money, but with dignity. Every Sunday you treated me like a person worth knowing, not a bank account to raid. Emma's pictures are the only decorations in my room because they're the only ones given with love." Uncle Marcus tried one last manipulation. "Mother Williams, surely blood means something. We're your children, grandchildren. Mistakes were made, but family. Martha's voice turned to steel. "Benita created a fund that supported all of you while you called her a failure. She paid your mortgages while you mocked her choices. She funded your dreams while you crushed hers with constant criticism. That's not family. That's parasitism." She pulled out another document, this one with a legal seal. "My new will is ironclad. Benita gets everything. The house in Beacon Hill worth $2 million. The investment portfolio worth $3 million. The 3 commercial properties downtown generating $40,000 monthly in rent. The art collection, the jewelry, the offshore accounts you didn't even know existed." The list continued, each asset another nail in their financial coffins. Family members mentally calculated what they were losing, the inheritance they'd spent years planning to waste, evaporating with each word. "There's more," Martha announced, clearly enjoying the dramatic reversal. "I've been documenting everything for prosecutors. Dorothy's theft, the elder abuse, the conspiracy to declare me incompetent. My lawyers say criminal charges are inevitable. Prison time likely." Dorothy collapsed into a chair, the weight of consequences finally crushing her delusions. The family members who'd been demanding their shares moments ago now scrambled to distance themselves from her crimes. But here's the best part. Martha's eyes sparkled with mischief. "I've already transferred $1 million to Benita's account, a gift for all those Sunday visits, legally documented and untouchable. The transfer went through while you were all screaming at each other." I stared at her in shock. "Martha, I can't." "You can and you will," she said firmly. "It's not payment for love, it's recognition of character. You'll use it better than these vultures ever would." Caroline made one desperate attempt. "Mother, please, I'm your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything?" Martha looked at her with decades of disappointment clear in her expression. "You haven't been my daughter since you started seeing me as an ATM. Real daughters don't drug their mothers for profit. Real daughters don't plan funerals for the living to access their money faster." She turned back to me. "Take me home, Benita. My real home, not whatever facility they've been researching. And bring Emma tomorrow. We'll paint sunflowers and read poetry like proper family does." I helped Martha toward the door, Janet flanking us protectively. Behind us, the family erupted again, but now their anger turned inward. Blame flew between members' alliances, shattered decades of resentment, boiling over without money to smooth the edges. "Oh, I almost forgot," Martha said at the doorway, turning back one final time. "Rosanna has copies of all the recordings. She's been instructed to release them to authorities if anyone harasses Benita or challenges the will." Consider that my final gift to family unity. We left them in their chaos, 3 women walking away from the wreckage of greed. In the car, Martha patted my hand. The hardest part was staying silent, she admitted. Watching them drain you while pretending senility nearly killed me. But I had to know who deserved my legacy. Turns out, it was the one who never knew it existed. As we drove toward her house, her real house, not the care facility they'd selected, I realized the family meeting had become something none of them expected. Not a restoration of the status quo, but a complete revelation of character. Martha had played the longest game using their greed against them, while identifying the only family member who loved without calculation. The money was staggering, but the validation was priceless. Every Sunday visit, every quiet hour reading together, every watercolor Emma painted had been seen and valued. The family fund was gone, but something far more valuable had taken its place: truth, justice, and the unexpected alliance between 2 women who refused to let greed define family. 3 days after the family meeting, the complete destruction of my family's false unity played out in spectacular fashion. I sat in my office at Ascent Strategies reviewing contracts while my phone lit up with messages I didn't answer. The family had turned on each other with vicious precision, years of suppressed resentments emerging now that their common funding source had vanished. Sarah knocked on my door holding a tablet with local news pulled up. "You might want to see this," she said carefully. "The story broke this morning." The headline read, "Prominent local family implodes over elder fraud scandal." Dorothy's arrest photo dominated the screen, her usually perfect hair-disheveled designer outfit replaced with county jail orange. The article detailed the embezzlement charges, citing a forensic accounting report that traced $300,000 in stolen funds. But the media coverage was just the beginning of the avalanche. Tyler had called Madison's husband, revealing her affair from 5 years ago, information he'd held as leverage, now deployed in spite. Madison retaliated by posting on social media about Tyler's tax evasion, complete with screenshots of texts where he bragged about hiding cash income from his landscaping business. The door opened again. This time, Jake walked in Tyler's 18-year-old son, my nephew. His eyes were red, shoulders slumped with the weight of family destruction. "Aunt Benita." He started, then stopped, struggling for words. "I'm sorry. For everything. For staying quiet when I knew what they were doing to you." I gestured for him to sit. Despite everything, the kids weren't responsible for their parents' choices. "I knew about the fund," he continued, voice barely above a whisper. "Dad told me years ago that you paid for everything, but made me promise to keep the secret. Said it would hurt your pride if others knew you were supporting everyone." The manipulation went deeper than I'd imagined. They'd recruited their children into their fictional narrative, creating another generation of enablers. When I got into private school, Dad said the scholarship was because of his connections, but I found the payment records in his office. Your name on every check. $60,000 a year, and he told everyone he negotiated a deal. I remained quiet, letting him process the truth he'd been carrying. "Mom wants to divorce him now," Jake added. "Not because of the lies about money, but because without your payments, he can't maintain her lifestyle. She's already meeting with lawyers to claim assets before creditors come for the business." The ripple effects continued expanding. Sarah interrupted with another update. Madison's husband had locked her out of their joint accounts after discovering the extent of her deception. Her boutique, already failing, wouldn't survive the week without my rent payments. My phone buzzed with a text from Melanie, the cousin who'd secretly recorded Thanksgiving. She was one of the few family members who'd shown genuine remorse. Her message was brief. "Grandma Dorothy got denied bail. Prosecution says she's a flight risk. Mom's having a breakdown." The irony wasn't lost on me. Dorothy, who'd lived lavishly on stolen funds, now faced the possibility of years in a cell smaller than her walk-in closet. The woman who'd drugged Martha for profit would learn how it felt to lose autonomy. Another knock interrupted my thoughts. My assistant announced a visitor I hadn't expected, my sister Amy, who'd moved to Switzerland years before the family dysfunction reached its peak. She walked in looking exactly as I remembered, but with new confidence in her bearing. "I've been waiting for this day," she said without preamble, pulling me into a fierce hug. "Watching from afar, knowing you were drowning but unable to help, without being pulled under, too." We sat on my office couch and Amy revealed her own story. I left because I saw what was starting. The entitlement, the manipulation, the way they needed you to be weak so they could feel strong. But I was young, scared. I ran instead of fighting. "You were smart," I corrected. "You protected yourself, while you protected everyone else." Amy's voice carried guilt and admiration in equal measure. "I've been documenting everything from abroad. Every social media post where they vacationed on your money while calling you pathetic. Every family email where they planned to drain more from you. I have it all." She pulled out a hard drive. 7 years of evidence. Screenshots, emails, financial records I managed to access. I thought maybe someday you'd need proof of their exploitation. The systematic nature of my family's betrayal, documented by the sister I'd thought had abandoned me, felt like another layer of revelation. Amy had been protecting me from afar, gathering evidence, while I'd been too close to see the full picture. "There's something else," Amy added, her expression darkening. "I've been in contact with Martha for years. She knew I was documenting things. We've been planning this together, waiting for you to finally break free. The conspiracy of protection around me, Martha pretending senility while staying lucid, Amy gathering evidence from Switzerland, Melanie secretly recording conversations, showed that not everyone in the family had been corrupted by greed." My phone rang with a number I recognized, Robert's. My father's voice sounded broken when I answered. "Your mother filed for divorce," he said without greeting. 40 years of marriage, and she's taking everything. The house you paid off the retirement funds, all of it. She says I humiliated her with the second family. I stayed silent, offering no comfort for consequences he'd earned. "Michelle, that's her name, the other woman she left too, took the kids and disappeared when the money stopped. 12 years, Benita. 12 years of living a double life, and they all abandoned me the moment the funds dried up." The parallel wasn't lost on either of us. He'd discovered what I'd always known: relationships built on money crumble without it. But where I'd been the source, he'd been another drain, siphoning funds for a fantasy life that evaporated at first challenge. "I need help," he finally said. Pride completely shattered. "I have nothing. No family, no money, nowhere to go. Please, Benita, you're my daughter." "I was your daughter when you called me a charity case," I responded evenly. "I was your daughter when you planned interventions about my failures while spending my money. I was your daughter when you chose another family over the one you had." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "We were wrong, all of us. We destroyed something beautiful because we couldn't see past our own greed." The apology, so long in coming, felt hollow now. Words couldn't undo years of emotional abuse disguised as family concern, but something in his broken voice made me soften slightly. "I won't give you money," I said clearly, "but I'll give you information. There's a men's shelter on Riverside that helps people restart. They have job placement programs, counseling services. You can rebuild, but you'll do it on your own effort, not mine." After ending the call, I looked around my office, the business I'd built while being called a failure, the success I'd hidden to preserve their egos. Amy sat beside me, finally reunited after years of strategic distance. In the outer office, my real team worked people who respected my abilities without needing my money. The family that had once seemed so essential to my identity was revealing its true nature. Without the binding agent of my financial support, they turned on each other with shocking speed. Brother against sister, spouse against spouse, parent against child. The unraveling was complete and merciless. But in the destruction, something else emerged. The family members who'd truly cared, Martha, Amy, even young Jake, were finally visible. The conspiracy of greed had shattered, but a smaller, genuine connection remained among those who'd loved without calculation. My phone buzzed with one final message from Tyler. "You've destroyed us all. Happy now." I turned off my phone without responding. The truth was more complex than happiness or sadness. Watching people face consequences wasn't joyful, but neither was enabling their dysfunction. I'd simply stepped away from a role they'd assigned me without consent. The destruction that followed was their own creation, built on a foundation of exploitation that couldn't survive without its source. Sarah knocked again, this time with news that made me smile. The Women's Entrepreneurship Center called. "They're ready to move forward with your funding. They want to name the building after you." The future I'd envisioned while funding others' presence was finally arriving. My family's unraveling was tragic, but necessary clearing space for something authentic to grow. The family fund was dead, but from its ashes, real purpose was emerging. The courthouse steps were slick with morning rain as I arrived for Dorothy's preliminary hearing. Media vans lined the street, the family scandal having evolved from local gossip to regional news. I pulled my coat tighter, avoiding eye contact with reporters shouting questions about family betrayal and million-dollar theft. Inside the courtroom, my extended family sat divided like wedding guests at a bitter divorce. Dorothy's supporters clustered on one side, mainly her children and siblings, who still believed her lies. The other side held those who'd accepted reality, including Martha in her wheelchair looking stronger than she had in years. Dorothy entered in shackles, the sound echoing through the marble chamber. Her attorney, clearly overwhelmed by the evidence against her, shuffled papers nervously. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Walsh, had called me the night before to confirm I'd testify if needed. The state charges Dorothy Patterson with embezzlement, elder abuse fraud, and conspiracy. The judge read each word, landing like a gavel strike. "How do you plead?" "Not guilty." Dorothy's voice cracked, lacking its usual authority. Catherine Walsh stood, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Your Honor, we have extensive evidence, including forensic accounting reports, recorded conversations of the defendant planning to steal from her elderly mother, and documentation of systematic theft exceeding $300,000. She played one of Martha's recordings for the court. Dorothy's voice filled the room, cold and calculating. "Once I increase her medication, she won't remember what she owns. I've already moved half the liquid assets. Benita's too trusting to check the estate properly." Dorothy's children shifted uncomfortably, hearing their mother's true nature broadcast publicly. Her daughter Sandra, who defended her vehemently, looked physically ill as recording after recording played. But Dorothy wasn't the only family member facing legal consequences. The IRS had opened investigations into Tyler and Madison based on the documented tax evasion. Tyler's landscaping business, already failing without my support, faced additional scrutiny for years of hidden cash transactions. The prosecutor called me to provide context about the family fund. I testified calmly, presenting 15 years of records showing systematic exploitation. The judge's expression grew increasingly grim as I detailed how family members had taken nearly $1 million while contributing nothing. They convinced themselves it was communal property, I explained. But every dollar came from my personal investments and business income. I have documentation for every transfer. Dorothy's attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, suggesting I'd entrapped a loving family. The strategy crumbled when Catherine presented evidence of my anonymous support. The mortgages paid off secretly the education funds established without recognition. During a recess, I encountered Robert in the hallway. My father had aged a decade in 2 weeks, his confident bearing replaced by hollow defeat. His second family's abandonment had combined with Caroline's divorce proceedings to leave him essentially homeless. "The divorce lawyer says Caroline gets everything," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "The house, the retirement accounts, even my golf clubs. Says marital betrayal invalidates our prenup." I said nothing, remembering how he'd betrayed not just Caroline, but our entire family by funding a secret life with money I'd provided. His Colorado family had vanished the moment payment stopped proving what I'd always known: relationships built on lies, and money couldn't survive truth and poverty. Back in the courtroom, more consequences unfolded. Madison's husband testified about discovering her boutique was a vanity project funded entirely by family fund withdrawals. Their divorce proceedings had revealed she'd hidden significant debts, expecting perpetual bailouts that would never come again. She spent $40,000 on inventory that never sold, he stated flatly. Told me business was booming while begging her sister for rent money. I only learned the truth when the payment stopped and creditors started calling. The local news had picked up the story of businesses failing without my support. Tyler's employees, suddenly unemployed, gave interviews about never being paid on time, despite Tyler's expensive trucks and vacations. The ripple effect touched dozens of people who depended on jobs that existed only through my subsidies. Martha testified next, her voice clear and damaging. She detailed years of Dorothy's manipulation, the drugs disguised as vitamins, the isolation from other family members who might have noticed the theft. The courtroom sat riveted as an 82-year-old woman explained how she'd gathered evidence while pretending dementia. My daughter thought I was too far gone to notice $300,000 disappearing, Martha stated. But I noticed everything. Every forged signature, every redirected payment, every lie told to cover the theft. I stayed silent to see who in my family had integrity. Only Benita passed that test. The judge denied bail, citing flight risk and the severity of charges. Dorothy sobbed as they led her back to jail, her children torn between supporting their mother and accepting her crimes. Sandra approached me outside the courthouse. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming. "I believed her lies about you. She said you were trying to steal Grandma's money, that the family fund was rightfully hers. I never imagined." I accepted her apology with cautious grace. The younger generation deserved chances their parents had squandered, but trust would take time to rebuild. The financial dominoes continued falling throughout the week. Uncle Marcus faced his own reckoning when the boat he'd bought with family fund money was repossessed. His wife filed for separation, unwilling to downgrade from the lifestyle my money had provided. Even cousins who'd remained peripheral faced consequences. Those who'd received regular support discovered they'd never developed financial skills. Without monthly deposits, they struggled with basic budgeting, credit card debt, mounting as reality replaced subsidy. Amy and I met with Catherine Walsh to discuss additional charges. The prosecutor explained that Dorothy faced 15 to 20 years if convicted on all counts. The elder abuse charges alone carried significant prison time, and the financial crimes added years. "Your documentation made this case," Catherine told me. "Most financial abuse within families goes unprosecuted because victims don't keep records. Your journals and files show clear patterns of exploitation." We also discussed the investigation into Robert's second family. Using family fund money for his double life constituted fraud, though prosecution was complicated by my lack of awareness. The prosecutor suggested civil suits might be more effective than criminal charges. The Hollywood production company that had expressed interest sent a formal offer for rights to the story. The documentary would explore financial abuse within families, using our case as the primary example. I agreed, with proceeds going to the Women's Entrepreneurship Center. Local news ran a segment on family financial abuse, featuring expert commentary on how successful women often hide achievements to maintain family harmony. The psychologist interviewed explained that families sometimes need a scapegoat to function, and financial providers often fill that role while being simultaneously demeaned. Tyler made one last desperate attempt, showing up at my office with his son, Jake. He looked haggard, his business officially bankrupt his wife, pursuing divorce. "I'll do anything," he begged. "Therapy, counseling, whatever you want. Just help me save something for Jake's future." I looked at my nephew, remembering he'd come forward with truth when he could have stayed silent. "Jake's education fund remains intact," I said carefully. "It's in a trust that neither you nor his mother can access. But you get nothing from me, Tyler. Not anymore." Tyler's face crumbled, but he nodded. Perhaps losing everything would finally teach what my funding never could: the value of self-sufficiency and the weight of consequences. The legal proceedings would continue for months, but the immediate impact was clear. A family built on exploitation had collapsed when the exploitation ended. Dorothy faced decades in prison. Robert lived in the men's shelter I'd recommended. Tyler and Madison's marriages and businesses had dissolved. Caroline, bitter and alone, had the house, but none of the families she'd prioritized money over. But in the wreckage, something cleaner emerged. Martha lived freely in her own home, no longer drugged or controlled. Amy had returned our sisterhood stronger for surviving separation. Young family members like Jake and Sandra, freed from their parents' toxic patterns, could choose different paths. The family fund that had enabled dysfunction for 15 years was gone. In its place stood boundaries, truth, and the hard-won knowledge that real family isn't defined by blood or money, but by mutual respect and genuine care. The legal consequences were harsh, but necessary clearing ground for something authentic to grow. 6 months after the family meeting that changed everything, I stood in the kitchen of our new home watching Emma arrange her colored pencils by shade. The Victorian house I'd renovated sat on a tree-lined street in Riverside Heights, its restored gingerbread trim catching the morning light. We'd moved in 3 weeks ago, leaving behind the modest rental that had served as camouflage for too long. "Mom, do you think the blue room or the yellow room would be better for my art studio?" Emma asked, her face serious with 7-year-old decision-making. "Why don't we look at both again after breakfast?" I suggested, plating her scrambled eggs. "The light changes throughout the day." She nodded sagely, already planning where her easel would go. The house had 6 bedrooms, more space than we needed, but I'd bought it partly for its potential. The carriage house in back would become office space for the entrepreneurship center. The main house's extra rooms could host women needing temporary sanctuary while rebuilding their lives. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Ascent Strategies had just landed another Fortune 500 client, our third since the family drama became public. Apparently, my story of overcoming financial abuse resonated with female executives who'd faced similar exploitation. "Is that work?" Emma asked, noting my smile. "Good news about work," I confirmed, "but nothing that can't wait until after our breakfast." This was part of the rebuilding, establishing boundaries between professional success and personal presence. Emma deserved my full attention during our moments together, something I'd learned while watching my family prioritize money over connection. After dropping Emma at her new school, a progressive academy focused on arts and emotional intelligence, I drove to my office. The familiar route felt different now, unburdened by the weight of family financial demands. No more mental calculations about who needed what, no more anxiety about maintaining others' lifestyles. Sarah greeted me with coffee and a stack of positive media responses. The documentary featuring our story had aired 2 weeks ago, generating thousands of emails from women experiencing similar situations. We'd hired 2 additional staff members just to manage correspondence. "There's someone here to see you," Sarah mentioned carefully. "Your ex-husband. He says it's important." Nathan waited in the conference room, looking uncomfortable but determined. We hadn't spoken beyond co-parenting logistics since the divorce 3 years ago. He stood when I entered, a gesture of respect that felt new. "Thank you for seeing me," he began. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything came out about your family." I sat across from him, curious but guarded. Nathan had been a decent husband, but weak when it came to standing up to my family's interference. Their constant criticism of me had eventually poisoned our marriage. "I owe you an apology," he continued. "A real one. I let your family convince me you were the problem. Every time your mother called you unstable, every time your father questioned your decisions, I absorbed it. I became another voice in the chorus telling you that you weren't enough." The acknowledgement so long in coming created an unexpected well of emotion. I'd forgiven myself for the marriage's failure, but hearing him take responsibility lifted weight I hadn't known I still carried. "They were so convincing," Nathan said, shaking his head. "Your mother would cry about how difficult you were, how they tried so hard to help you. I believed them over my own observations. You were building a business, raising Emma, beautifully managing everything, and I let them convince me you were falling apart." "What changed your perspective?" I asked. Watching them turn on each other the moment the money stopped, he admitted. Seeing how quickly their concern for you transformed into rage when you set boundaries. Real family doesn't operate that way. I realized I'd been manipulated into becoming another weapon against you. We talked for an hour, not about reconciliation, but about understanding. Nathan was seeing a therapist to understand why he'd been so susceptible to manipulation. He wanted to be a better father to Emma, to support her without the toxic patterns that had damaged our marriage. I'm also increasing child support, he announced. Not because the court requires it, but because I've been promoted twice since our divorce. Emma deserves to benefit from my success. The gesture, voluntary and unexpected, marked real growth. We established new co-parenting guidelines focused on protecting Emma from family dysfunction, while maintaining healthy relationships where possible. Nathan left with a handshake and hope for better dynamics ahead. The afternoon brought a session with Dr. Patricia Reeves, the therapist I'd finally started seeing. Her office, with its soft lighting and comfortable chairs, had become a sanctuary for processing years of suppressed trauma. "How are the boundaries holding?" she asked after I updated her on the week's events. "Better than expected," I admitted. I got a letter from Tyler asking for help, and I was able to read it without guilt. Progress right. She smiled. "Significant progress. You're breaking a pattern that took decades to establish. The guilt will fade as you practice maintaining boundaries." We explored why I'd hidden my success for so long, the psychology of being designated family provider, while simultaneously being diminished. Dr. Reeves helped me understand that my family had needed me to appear weak because my strength threatened their self-perception. "You represented what they couldn't achieve," she explained. "Rather than being inspired, they needed to tear you down to avoid confronting their own limitations. Your financial support allowed them to maintain superiority fantasies while living off your success." The clarity helped dissolve lingering confusion about their behavior. They hadn't been cruel despite my generosity, but because of it. Every dollar I gave reminded them of their dependence, so they constructed elaborate fictions to reverse our positions in their minds. After therapy, I met Amy for lunch at our new favorite restaurant. She'd returned permanently from Switzerland, setting up her own financial consulting firm with international connections. We'd grown closer in 6 months than we'd been in the previous 20 years. "I have news," she announced over salads. "I've been working with Martha's lawyers to establish a family financial literacy fund. She wants to prevent this pattern from repeating in future generations." The irony of Martha funding financial education after Dorothy's theft wasn't lost on either of us. But Martha, cleared of the fog of forced medication, had become a force for positive change. Her fortune would teach what our family had failed to learn: financial responsibility and respect for those who provide. "She also wants to fund your entrepreneurship center," Amy added. "Full endowment, $5 million. I nearly dropped my fork. The center had been my dream for years, planned for gradual development. Martha's gift would accelerate everything, allowing immediate full programming for women escaping financial abuse. That evening, Emma and I had dinner with Martha at her home. She'd hired competent caregivers who respected her autonomy, and the house bloomed with life again. Emma showed off her latest paintings while Martha offered gentle encouragement. "You know what I love about you, Emma?" Martha asked. "You create beauty because it brings you joy, not because someone demands it." The distinction mattered. Emma was growing up free from the conditional love that had warped generations. She knew her worth wasn't tied to achievement or provision, but to her inherent self. As we drove home, Emma asked, "Mom, why don't we see the other family anymore?" I'd prepared for this question with Dr. Reeves' help. Sometimes people need time apart to learn and grow. We're focusing on building our new life right now. "But we still have Grandma Martha and Aunt Amy," she said, satisfied with the simple explanation, "and my new school friends. And Nathan comes to my recitals now." "Yes, sweetheart, we're building a chosen family of people who love us for who we are." That night, after Emma was asleep, I stood in my home office reviewing plans for the Entrepreneurship Center. The building Amy and I had toured that morning would be perfect accessible location, flexible spaces, room for growth. Martha's funding meant we could open within 3 months instead of 3 years. My phone showed 17 missed calls from various family members. The pattern had become predictable. Anger, bargaining, depression, more anger. But for the first time in my life, their emotional states weren't my responsibility. I deleted the voicemails unheard, protecting my peace. Sarah had forwarded an email from a publisher interested in my full story as a memoir. The documentary had created demand for deeper exploration of family financial abuse. I set it aside for consideration focused on present building rather than past pain. The rebuilding wasn't just about physical spaces or professional success. It was reconstructing my identity outside the role of family provider, learning to be Benita, the successful entrepreneur, not Benita, the secret benefactor. Benita, the mother raising a confident daughter, not Benita, the family failure. 6 months ago, I'd lost a family that had never truly seen me. In exchange, I'd gained freedom, genuine relationships, and the space to build something meaningful. The trade felt more valuable with each passing day. The family fund was gone, but in its place grew purpose, peace, and the profound relief of living authentically. The international arrivals gate at Logan Airport buzzed with typical chaos, but I stood still in the swirl of movement, watching for Amy's familiar stride. She'd texted from the plane 7 years of Swiss efficiency, hadn't changed her need to update me on every travel detail. When she finally emerged pulling a single black suitcase, the years melted away. "You look happy," were her first words after our embrace. "Actually happy, not the performance happy you used to do." We collected her bags and drove toward my house, windows down despite the cool spring air. Amy had always needed freshness after flights, a quirk I remembered from our childhood. The city had changed since she'd left, but her observant eyes caught every detail. "I can't believe they're all really facing consequences," she said as we navigated familiar streets. "For years I watched from Zurich expecting you to break free, but thinking the family would somehow escape accountability." "Martha and her recordings changed everything," I replied. "Without those, Dorothy might have talked her way out of charges." Amy pulled out a tablet from her bag. "Speaking of documentation, let me show you what I've compiled." The screen filled with organized folders, financial records, social media screenshots, email chains, tax documents. 7 years of evidence, all legally obtained from public sources or sent directly to me. She opened a folder labeled The Exploitation Timeline. Screenshots showed Facebook posts where family members vacationed using money from the fund, while simultaneously posting condolences about my struggles. Tyler smiling on a fishing boat purchased with $40,000 from the fund, captioned, "Hard work pays off." Posted the same week he'd called me pathetic for driving an old Honda. "This one's my favorite," Amy said bitterly, showing Madison's Instagram from her Cabo trip. "Living my best life, so blessed," posted 2 days after she told everyone at Easter that I couldn't afford to contribute to Mom's birthday gift. The documentation was staggering. Amy had cataloged every instance of cognitive dissonance, every post celebrating luxuries I'd funded while demeaning my choices. The patterns laid out chronologically showed escalating entitlement correlating directly with increased financial support. We reached my house as the sun set, painting the Victorians' restored exterior in golden light. Amy stopped on the sidewalk, taking in the transformation. "It's exactly what you described in your letters when we were kids, the dream house you'd own someday." Inside, Emma bounded down the stairs, having waited impatiently for her aunt's arrival. She'd prepared a welcome sign in careful 7-year-old handwriting, "Welcome home, Aunt Amy," with painted butterflies around the edges. "You must be the famous artist, Emma," Amy said seriously, studying the sign with appropriate reverence. "I've heard about your butterfly expertise." Emma beamed, immediately launching into details about monarch migration patterns. I watched them connect my daughter, finally having an aunt who saw her as a person rather than a potential financial resource. Amy listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she valued Emma's knowledge. After Emma's bedtime, Amy and I settled in the living room with tea and 7 years of catching up to finish. She told me about her work in financial compliance, how she'd specialized in identifying family financial abuse patterns after watching ours unfold. "I've consulted on over 200 cases," she explained. "The patterns are remarkably consistent. There's always one provider, usually female, who's simultaneously depended upon and diminished. The family creates elaborate fictions to justify the exploitation." "Did you ever try to warn me earlier?" I asked, curious rather than accusatory. Amy's face clouded. "I wrote so many draft emails, but I knew they'd turn it into evidence of jealousy or interference. They'd already started painting me as the bitter sister who abandoned family. Coming back would have given them another target without protecting you." She was right. My family would have weaponized any intervention, using it to further isolate me. Amy's strategic distance had preserved her credibility for when it mattered most. "Let me show you something else," Amy said, pulling out a different tablet. "This is encrypted, completely separate from the other documentation. It contains correspondence between Martha and me over the years." The emails revealed an extraordinary partnership. Martha, fully lucid, had reached out to Amy when she first noticed Dorothy's theft. Together, they'd built a careful strategy for exposing the truth while protecting evidence. Martha had even transferred some assets to Swiss accounts under Amy's guidance, keeping them safe from Dorothy's reach. "She knew 5 years ago," I asked, stunned by the timeline. "She wanted to move sooner, but I convinced her to wait," Amy admitted. "We needed irrefutable evidence. More importantly, we needed you to be ready. If we'd exposed everything while you were still enabling them, you might have continued out of guilt." The calculation felt cold but necessary. They'd waited until I reached my breaking point, naturally ensuring the revelation would lead to freedom rather than deeper entanglement. "There's more," Amy continued, her voice gentle. "Martha's been funding something else through me, a private investigation into the entire family's finances. We have evidence of tax fraud going back a decade, disability fraud from Uncle Marcus, and 3 other family members taking COVID relief funds illegally. The scope of criminality throughout the family exceeded even my cynical expectations. They hadn't just exploited me, they defrauded systems designed to help the truly needy. My money had enabled them to avoid consequences while compounding their crimes." "What do we do with it?" I asked. "That's your choice," Amy replied. "Martha wanted options ready if you needed leverage. But if you prefer to let legal systems handle what's already exposed, we can seal these files. Your peace matters more than their complete punishment." I thought about the weight of carrying anger versus the freedom of release. Dr. Reeves and I had worked extensively on choosing peace over justified revenge. "Let the authorities handle what they know. I don't need to pursue more. Living well is the best response." Amy smiled. "I hoped you'd say that. Martha will be pleased. She worries about you carrying their poison forward." We talked until nearly dawn, filling gaps created by strategic separation. Amy told me about quiet moments of doubt in Switzerland, wondering if she'd made the right choice. I shared the grinding exhaustion of maintaining family fictions while building real success. We grieved the relationships that might have been with a healthier family dynamic. "I have a confession," Amy said as birds began singing outside. "I almost came back 3 years ago. When Nathan left, I bought a plane ticket. But I saw the family circling like vultures, using your divorce to reinforce their narrative, and I knew my presence would complicate rather than help." "You helped more from afar," I assured her. "Knowing someone was documenting truth, even if I didn't know it, then means everything now." Amy had scheduled 2 weeks for her visit, but over breakfast, she made an announcement. "I've been offered a position here in Boston, International Compliance Director for a major firm. I was waiting to see if there was anything here worth returning for." Emma, eating pancakes shaped like butterflies, perked up. "You could come to my recitals and help with the butterfly garden we're planning." "Compelling arguments," Amy said solemnly. "What do you think, Benita, room in your life for a prodigal sister?" The answer came easily. The family we'd lost had been replaced by something smaller but infinitely more valuable. Amy's return wouldn't recreate the past, but build a different future. One where success was celebrated boundaries, respected, and love came without price tags. That afternoon, Amy accompanied me to Martha's house. The reunion between conspirators was touching Martha's eyes bright with satisfaction, Amy's respect evident in every gesture. They'd partnered across continents and years to protect me. Two women understanding what the rest of the family couldn't, that real love means wanting someone's freedom, not their subjugation. Phase 1 complete, Martha announced with a grin that made her look decades younger. Now for Phase 2, building something better from the ashes. She was right. The demolition was finished. Dorothy faced trial. Other family members struggled with consequences of their choices. The family fund that had enabled dysfunction was gone. But in its place, connections based on truth were growing. Amy's return marked the beginning of reconstruction, not of what was, but of what should have been all along. 8 months had passed since the family meeting that shattered our artificial unity. I sat in my office reviewing quarterly reports when Sarah knocked her expression indicating significant news. "You have visitors," she said carefully. "Your mother and Tyler. They say it's important." I hadn't seen either of them since the courthouse. Caroline had aged significantly, her perfectly maintained appearance, replaced by something rawer, more honest. Tyler looked like a man who'd been wrestling with reality and losing his landscaping business, gone marriage-dissolved pride in pieces. "Thank you for seeing us," Caroline began, her voice lacking its usual authority. "We know we don't deserve your time." I gestured for them to sit, maintaining professional distance. Whatever had brought them here, I wouldn't let emotional manipulation disguise itself as reconciliation. "I've been in therapy." Caroline continued the admission, clearly costing her. "Real therapy, not the kind where you pay someone to agree with you. Dr. Morrison has helped me understand things, difficult things." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "I lost everything," he said simply. "Business house, family. Been working construction for 6 months, living in a studio apartment. First honest work I've done in years." The revelation surprised me. Tyler performing manual labor instead of managing crews funded by my money marked genuine change, but I remained silent, letting them reveal their purposes. "I've been jealous of you since you were 17. Caroline admitted, tears starting. "You took that money from Grandma Elena and transformed it into something remarkable. I watched you build success from nothing while I spent my life spending what others earned. The jealousy became so consuming that I needed you to be failing, needed it like air." The confession, raw and unvarnished, created unexpected resonance. Dr. Reeves had theorized about my mother's motivations, but hearing Caroline confirm them felt different. "Every time you succeeded, it reminded me of my failures," she continued. "So I convinced myself and everyone else that you were struggling. The narrative became so essential that I chose it over truth, over you, over basic decency. I drugged my own mother and told myself it was for her good when really I couldn't stand her preferring you." Tyler found his voice again. "We formed a cult of delusion, made you the sacrifice that let us feel superior. Every dollar you gave reinforced the lie because accepting your success meant confronting our failures. So we took and took, while telling ourselves we were helping you." "What do you want?" I asked directly, cutting through the emotional archaeology. Caroline reached into her purse, pulling out an envelope. "Nothing. That's what we finally understood. We came to give, not take." She placed the envelope on my desk. "It's not much, 20,000 between us, but it's a start on repaying what we stole." I stared at the check, shocked by the reversal. 20,000 against nearly $1 million wasn't significant mathematically, but symbolically it represented a fundamental shift. They were attempting to give rather than take. "I've been cleaning houses," Caroline added with a bitter smile. "Humbling to scrub toilets at 71, but honest. Tyler and I pool our earnings. It'll take decades to repay everything, but we need to try. When I asked, genuinely curious about their transformation. Because the alternative is dying as parasites, Tyler said bluntly. Jake won't speak to me, says he's ashamed of who I became. My own son sees me clearer than I saw myself. That woke me up. I want him to have one memory of his father trying to make things right. We talked for an hour, the conversation unlike any we'd had before. No manipulation, no hidden agendas, just broken people acknowledging damage and attempting repair. They shared details of their current lives, Caroline's efficiency apartment, Tyler's construction crew that respected his work ethic, their weekly therapy sessions confronting decades of entitlement. Madison's different, Caroline warned, still convinced everyone conspired against her. She's living with a man who enables her fantasies, telling her she's a victim. And your father... She paused, pain evident. Robert's broken beyond repair. The shelter asked him to leave for refusing to follow rules. Last I heard, he was on the streets. The image of my father homeless struck despite everything, but I'd offered him resources he'd rejected, preferring self-pity to self-improvement. Some people chose destruction over difficult change. Dorothy was sentenced yesterday, Tyler added. 12 years. She'll be 75 when released if she lives that long. Her children won't visit too ashamed of association. The family matriarch who'd orchestrated theft while preaching superiority would spend her remaining years in prison. The poetry of justice felt hollow rather than satisfying. Wasted lives couldn't be recovered through punishment. After they left, I sat with their check, processing the unprecedented reversal. Sarah knocked again, bringing coffee and gentle concern. That seemed intense. Are you okay? They're trying to change, I said, still absorbing the possibility. Whether it lasts or becomes another performance, I don't know, but the effort seems genuine. The afternoon brought another surprise, Madison appearing at reception, demanding to see me. Unlike Caroline and Tyler's humility, she radiated righteous anger. Security escorted her to the conference room where her fury could be contained. How dare you cash that check from them? She started immediately. That was family money they gave you, money that should help all of us recover from what you did. The delusion remained complete in at least one family member. Madison had rewritten history so thoroughly that she genuinely believed I'd wronged them by withdrawing support I'd solely provided. Madison that money came from their jobs. They earned it cleaning houses and building foundations. It has nothing to do with family funds that never existed beyond my contributions. Lies. Her voice cracked with desperate conviction. We all contributed. I have memories of family meetings where we discussed our investments. You've manipulated everyone, probably drugged them like Dorothy drugged Grandma. This is all an elaborate theft. I recognized the psychology maintaining delusion was easier than confronting 15 years of parasitic behavior. Madison needed me as a villain to avoid seeing herself clearly. No amount of evidence would penetrate armor built from pure denial. You need to leave, I said quietly, and don't come back. If you appear again, I'll pursue a restraining order. She left screaming threats about lawsuits and justice, her voice echoing through professional spaces where real work happened. Several employees looked concerned, but I waved them back to tasks. Madison's breakdown belonged to her, not to the life I'd built. That evening, Emma and I attended her school's art showcase. Her butterfly collection earned special recognition, the teacher praising her attention to scientific detail within creative expression. Watching her beam with pride surrounded by supportive community rather than toxic family reinforced every difficult decision. Amy met us afterward for ice cream, our new tradition of simple celebrations. She'd accepted the Boston position and found an apartment 6 blocks away. Close enough for regular dinners, far enough to maintain healthy boundaries, the balance we'd never achieved in youth. Caroline and Tyler came today. I told her between bites of mint chocolate chip. With money and apologies. Amy nearly dropped her cone. Actual money they gave instead of took. $20,000, and jobs and therapy, and what seemed like genuine accountability. We processed this development while Emma created ice cream soup, a 7-year-old's culinary experiment. The family we'd known was truly dead if members were voluntarily reversing financial flow. Whether redemption was possible remained uncertain, but the attempt marked profound change. "What will you do with it?" Amy asked about the check. "Add it to the entrepreneurship fund." I decided, let money given in exploitation become opportunity for others. Transform the negative pattern into positive impact. That night after Emma slept, I stood on my porch watching the city lights. 8 months ago, I'd been drowning in family financial obligations while being called a failure. Now former dependents were working minimum wage jobs to repay debts they'd finally acknowledged. The reversal felt surreal but hopeful. My phone showed one message from Jake. "Grandma Caroline gave me your number. I know Dad came to see you. I'm proud of him for trying, proud of you for everything. Thank you for protecting my college fund. I won't waste the opportunity." The next generation was learning different lessons. Jake would understand money as earned, not expected. Emma would know love as unconditional, not transactional. The cycles broken through painful confrontation could stay broken through conscious choice. Tomorrow, the Entrepreneurship Center would host its first planning meeting. 23 women had already applied for the inaugural program. Their stories echoed mind-talented individuals held back by family financial abuse, needing support to build independent success. The reckoning continued rippling outward. Some family members faced legal consequences. Others confronted personal demons. A few attempted genuine change. But the most important reckoning was internal. My acceptance that their responses weren't my responsibility. I'd spent 15 years trying to purchase love that couldn't be bought. Now I invested in futures that wanted to flourish. The ribbon stretched across the entrance of the Benita Williams Center for Women's Entrepreneurship, deep purple against the restored brick facade. 6 months of intensive renovation had transformed the historic building into a beacon of possibility. Emma stood beside me holding the ceremonial scissors, while Martha beamed from her wheelchair and Amy adjusted the microphone for our brief ceremony. This center represents transformation. I began looking at the gathered crowd of supporters, media, and inaugural program participants, not just of a building, but of lives held back by circumstances beyond their control. Every woman who enters these doors will find resources, mentorship, and most importantly, belief in her capabilities. Emma helped me cut the ribbon to enthusiastic applause. The center's first cohort, 25 women from diverse backgrounds, waited inside for orientation. Their applications had revealed stories painfully familiar: family financial abuse, hidden talents, dreams, deferred by others' demands. Sarah had transitioned from my assistant to the center's program director, her organizational skills perfect for building something new. She guided tours through spaces designed for growth conference rooms, for strategy sessions, a technology lab donated by my newest Fortune 500 client quiet offices, for focused work, and a childcare center, recognizing that many participants were single mothers, like I'd been. "The response has been overwhelming," Sarah explained to the documentary crew following our launch. "Over 300 applications for 25 spots. Benita insisted we accept based on potential and need not traditional credentials." I moved through the building, greeting participants and sharing abbreviated versions of my story. Each woman's eyes held recognition. They'd lived variations of the same struggle, balancing others' needs against their own dreams. Here, finally, was space to prioritize themselves without guilt. Amy had designed the financial literacy curriculum, drawing from years of observing our family's dysfunction. Understanding money means understanding power dynamics, she explained to the first workshop group. We'll teach not just budgeting, but recognizing and resisting financial manipulation. The international reach of my story, amplified by the documentary, had attracted corporate sponsors eager to support women's economic independence. Major companies funded scholarships, provided internship opportunities, and offered contracts to center graduates. What started as personal healing had become systematic change. Martha attended every session she could manage her presence, a reminder of hidden strength in unexpected places. She'd become the center's unofficial grandmother, sharing wisdom earned through decades of observation. Her favorite workshop was Recognizing Your Worth, where she helped women understand their value beyond monetary provision. 3 months into our first program, success stories emerged. Maria, who'd supported her extended family while they belittled her cleaning business, had restructured into a commercial service with 12 employees. Jennifer, whose husband had controlled their finances, while she raised 4 children, launched a virtual assistance company serving international clients. Diane transformed her secret food blog into a catering business after learning her family had been stealing her recipes for their restaurant. The Hollywood documentary's success had led to a book deal. I spent evenings writing transforming pain into guidance for others trapped in similar situations. The advance went entirely to the center funding expansion into a second location. My business ascent strategies had evolved too. We specialize now in companies wanting to support women's advancement consulting on everything from family-friendly policies to recognizing signs of employee financial abuse. The very story my family had forced me to hide became my professional strength. Emma thrived in her new environment. Her confidence bloomed without toxic voices suggesting limitations. She'd started teaching art to younger children at the community center, discovering joy in sharing knowledge. When asked about her future dreams, she answered simply, "Help people see beauty they create." The family members attempting redemption had maintained their efforts. Caroline cleaned houses with surprising efficiency, her perfectionism finally serving a useful purpose. She'd sent another check last month, small but consistent. Tyler's construction work had earned his crew's respect. He'd been promoted to shift supervisor, the first advancement earned through merit rather than manipulation. Their presence in my life remained minimal but meaningful. Monthly letters updating their progress, occasional deposits toward their self-imposed debt holiday cards, acknowledging distance while expressing hope. They understood proximity was no longer possible, but integrity could be rebuilt slowly. Others hadn't fared as well. Madison continued her delusions, now supplemented by a blog claiming she'd been victimized by family conspiracy. Her few readers seemed to be other individuals refusing accountability for their choices. Robert had disappeared entirely after leaving the shelter, too proud or broken to accept help. Dorothy served her sentence in minimum security teaching literacy to fellow inmates, perhaps finding redemption through service or simply passing time. The Entrepreneurship Center's success attracted national attention. Similar programs contacted us for replication guidance. Amy developed a framework that could be adapted to different communities while maintaining core principles: economic education, emotional support, practical resources, and celebration of success without shame. One evening, while reviewing applications for our third cohort, I found a familiar name: Sandra Patterson, Dorothy's daughter, my cousin. Her essay detailed watching her mother's crimes destroy their family, her determination to build something honest from the wreckage. She'd been working 2 jobs while attending community college, saving to start a tutoring service for struggling students. I called Amy over to review the application. We'd established policies about family involvement, but Sandra hadn't benefited from the family fund. She'd been a child during peak exploitation, years guilty only of believing her mother's lies until evidence proved otherwise. She qualifies on merit, Amy concluded after careful review. High scores on assessment, clear business plan, strong recommendations. The question is whether you're comfortable with family participation. The center existed to break cycles. Punishing Sandra for Dorothy's crimes would perpetuate the dysfunction we sought to end. After discussion with our advisory board, we accepted her application with full transparency about our connection. Sandra thrived in the program, her business plan evolving through mentorship and peer support. Watching her present at our demo day, confident and capable, reinforced that corruption wasn't genetic. Given different circumstances and choices, any family member could have chosen integrity. The book release coincided with our first anniversary celebration. From Fun to Freedom-Breaking Financial Abuse in Families debuted at number 3 on nonfiction bestseller lists. Revenue-funded scholarships for women unable to afford even minimal program fees. Speaking engagements followed, though I selected carefully. Universities wanting to understand family financial dynamics. Corporate conferences exploring women's economic empowerment. Legislative hearings on elder financial abuse. Each platform expanded awareness, helping others recognize patterns before they consume decades. Emma accompanied me to appropriate events, her poise remarkable for 8 years old. She'd internalized lessons about money and relationships that took me 40 years to learn. When asked about her mother's work, she answered simply, "She helps people become themselves." 1 year after cutting the ribbon, the center had graduated 75 women. Their businesses employed over 200 people, generating millions in economic activity. But statistics only told surface truth. Deeper impact showed in confidence rebuilt children, seeing mothers' valued cycles broken through conscious choice. Martha's health had declined gradually, though her spirit remained fierce. On her 90th birthday, celebrated at the center, surrounded by women she'd inspired, she pulled me aside. "I won't see the full fruition," she said peacefully, "but knowing it will continue brings more satisfaction than hoarding wealth ever could. You transformed exploitation into empowerment. That's legacy worth leaving." She passed peacefully 2 weeks later, her funeral attended by hundreds, whose lives she'd touched directly or indirectly. The family members who drugged and robbed her stayed away, their shame or legal restrictions preventing attendance. But the chosen family she'd recognized and supported filled every pew, honoring a woman who'd played the longest game for the highest stakes, truth and justice. Her will already executed left everything as promised to Emma and me. But more valuable than money was the model she'd provided, watching silently until action mattered, choosing integrity over easy compliance, supporting those who showed genuine love rather than calculated affection. The Entrepreneurship Center commissioned a portrait of Martha for our main conference room. Her knowing eyes would watch over generations of women, learning their worth, building their dreams, refusing exploitation disguised as family obligation. The family fund that had drained me for 15 years had transformed into something sustaining thousands. The legacy wasn't money, but the awakening it enabled. Women who'd been taught they were worth only what they provided learned they were valuable simply for existing. The center stood as proof that patterns could be broken, abuse could be transformed into empowerment, and the best response to being drained was becoming a source for others ready to rise. Emma's 8th birthday approached with the excitement only childhood could generate. She'd been planning her party for weeks, carefully curating the guest list with diplomatic skill. "We need the butterflies here and the rainbow streamers there," she directed, transforming our backyard into her vision of celebration. The morning of her birthday, I found her at the kitchen table creating place cards with meticulous care. Each name written in different colored markers, decorated with tiny drawings that reflected her relationship with that person. Amy's card featured musical notes from their weekly piano lessons together. Martha's card, though she'd passed 6 months ago, sat at what Emma called the memory spot, a place setting, honoring those who couldn't attend but remained present in spirit. "Should I make one for Grandma Caroline?" Emma asked, her tone carefully neutral. We'd been navigating the complexities of limited family contact with help from her therapist, Dr. Chen. "What does your heart tell you?" I asked, sitting beside her. Emma considered seriously. "She sends nice letters now, and she's trying to be better. Maybe a small card." We worked together on a simple place card for Caroline, who'd been invited for a brief afternoon visit, the first in-person contact in over a year. The boundaries remained firm, but Emma deserved the chance to know family members who'd demonstrated genuine change. Sarah arrived early with the cake she'd insisted on baking, a 3-tier butterfly creation that belonged in a magazine. "The center can survive 1 day without me," she laughed, adding final touches to the frosting. The center had grown to 15 full-time staff serving over 200 women annually. Amy pulled up with her partner Marcus, whom she'd met at a financial compliance conference. He understood complicated family dynamics, having escaped his own toxic system. Their relationship, built on mutual respect and independence, showed Amy had learned to love without losing herself. The party filled with chosen family, Emma's friends from school, their parents who'd become our community colleagues, who'd transcended professional boundaries. Nathan arrived with his girlfriend Lisa, their relationship healthy because he'd done the work to understand his patterns. Co-parenting had become genuinely cooperative, both of us prioritizing Emma over old wounds. Quite different from birthdays past. Amy observed, watching children chase bubbles across the lawn. Remember our childhood parties? The tension, the performance, everyone calculating who gave the best gift? This celebration held joy without undertones. No one kept score. Gifts reflected thought rather than obligation. Laughter came naturally instead of nervously. The difference between chosen and circumstantial family had never been clearer. Caroline arrived precisely at 2, as agreed. She looked healthier than during our last meeting, her work cleaning houses apparently agreeing with her physically, if not emotionally. She carried a small, wrapped gift and larger burden of uncertainty. "Thank you for allowing this," she said quietly. "I know I don't deserve—" "Today is about Emma," I interrupted gently. "She wanted you here. That's enough reason." Emma ran over, offering the careful hug of a child who'd learned boundaries early. "Hi, Grandma Caroline. Want to see my butterfly garden?" They walked together toward the flower beds Emma tended religiously. Caroline listened with apparent interest as Emma explained each plant's purpose in attracting different butterfly species. The interaction looked almost normal. Grandmother and granddaughter sharing a moment, except for the careful distance maintained by both. Tyler arrived 30 minutes later, Jake beside him. Father and son had rebuilt their relationship through family therapy and Tyler's genuine accountability. Jake, now 20 and thriving in college, had become a mentor at the center teaching financial literacy to teenagers. "Aunt Benita." Jake hugged me warmly. "Thanks for including us. Emma's lucky to have you." "She's lucky to have cousins who've chosen growth," I replied, meaning it. The next generation didn't need to carry their parents' failures. The afternoon unfolded with surprising ease. Caroline and Tyler participated without dominating their hard-won humility, allowing space for others. When Emma opened presents they'd given thoughtfully, art supplies, chosen with knowledge of her interests, rather than assumptions about what she should want. Dr. Patricia Reeves attended, having become a friend beyond our therapeutic relationship. She observed the dynamics with professional interest and personal investment. "You've built something beautiful here," she told me during a quiet moment. "Real family formed by choice and nurtured through respect." As cake time approached, Emma stood on a chair, commanding attention with inherited confidence. "I want to make a speech," she announced, her voice clear, despite missing front teeth. "Thank you for coming to my party," she began formally. "I know some families are different from mine, but I think our family is special because everyone here chose to love us. Mom says chosen family is extra strong because it's built on purpose, not accident." The assembled group, blood relatives working toward redemption. Chosen family who'd proven themselves professionals, who'd become personal, listened to an 8-year-old articulate what I'd taken decades to learn. "I miss Grandma Martha," Emma continued. "She taught me that being smart means watching and choosing good people. So I choose all of you, even the ones who made mistakes before, because Mom says people can change if they really try." Caroline wiped tears as Emma concluded her speech. Tyler stared at his work-roughened hands. The weight of a child's forgiveness, conditional on continued growth, sat heavy and hopeful. The party continued past sunset fairy lights, creating magic as children played and adults connected. I found myself on the porch with Amy, watching our carefully constructed life bloom in real time. "She's remarkable," Amy said about Emma. "Wise beyond her years, but still genuinely childlike. You've protected her innocence while teaching her strength." "She teaches me too," I admitted. Her capacity for calibrated trust, knowing people can earn proximity without receiving complete access. I was 40 before learning that lesson. Nathan approached with cake for us both, his presence comfortable now. "Lisa and I wanted to run something by you," he said carefully. "We're thinking of trying for a baby. Emma would have a half-sibling. Want to make sure we handle it right for her." The conversation that might have triggered possessiveness or fear instead generated collaborative planning. We discussed how to frame the expansion for Emma, ensuring she felt secure rather than replaced. Nathan's growth allowed him to seek input rather than make unilateral decisions. As guests began departing, each goodbye carried warmth. Parents exchanged numbers for playdates. Colleagues confirmed lunch plans. The network created through conscious choice strengthened with each interaction. Caroline and Tyler left together, their brief visit ending appropriately. "Thank you," Caroline said simply, "for letting us witness who she's becoming. We'll keep earning whatever place you allow." Their humility maintained over 18 months suggested real change might be possible. Not reunion in any traditional sense, but perhaps a careful dance of controlled contact that honored growth while protecting boundaries. After everyone left and Emma finally crashed from birthday excitement, I sat in my office reviewing center applications. 300 for the next cohort, each representing a woman ready to break free from financial manipulation. The work that began with personal necessity had become systematic change. Amy knocked before entering with tea and leftovers. "Full circle moment," she observed. A year ago, Emma's birthday would have been about managing family drama. Now it's purely about celebrating her. She was right. The transformation from obligation to choice, from manipulation to respect, from hidden success to open celebration marked a complete revolution. The family fund that once drained possibility had become fertile ground for hundreds of women's dreams. My phone showed a message from Sandra Dorothy's daughter, who'd graduated from our program. Her tutoring business had expanded to 3 locations. She'd sent a photo of her newest space with a note, "None of this would exist without second chances. Thank you for seeing past my mother's crimes to my potential." The ripples continued expanding. Each woman who found freedom through the center created opportunities for others. Children grew up seeing mothers valued for their brilliance rather than their service. Partners learned relationships could be mutual rather than extractive. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Best birthday ever," she mumbled, crawling into my lap despite being almost too big. "Love you, Mom." "Love you too, butterfly," I whispered, holding her close. The journey from that first group message, the declaration that I should step away, had led here through pain, revelation, and reconstruction. They'd meant to diminish me, but instead freed me to build something magnificent. The family fund was gone, but in its place stood proof that cycles could be broken. Worth wasn't determined by others' opinions, and the best revenge against those who'd tried to make you small was becoming exactly who you were meant to be. Emma drifted back to sleep in my arms, surrounded by evidence of chosen family's love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges at the center, continued navigation of family boundaries, and ongoing growth. But tonight, in the quiet aftermath of celebration, the full circle felt complete. The little girl who'd once believed she had to buy love with money had become a woman, teaching others they were valuable simply for existing. And the daughter in my arms would never question her worth, knowing from her first breath that love was freely given, not earned through service. The transformation was complete, the legacy secured, the future bright with possibility born from the ashes of exploitation, transformed into empowerment. The morning sun streamed through my office windows as I closed the laptop, having just finalized the last documentation, dissolving the family fund completely. Every account closed, every automatic payment terminated, every legal connection severed. What had once felt like cutting lifelines now felt like removing shackles. The past 2 years since that pivotal group message had transformed everything. I looked around my office at Ascent Strategies walls lined with photos from the entrepreneurship centers, graduations thank you letters from women who'd built businesses, and Emma's latest butterfly paintings. This was wealth impact connection and the freedom to choose who deserved my energy. Caroline's letter arrived with the morning mail, her monthly check enclosed as always. 2 years of consistent payments had totaled $48,000, still a fraction of what they'd taken, but representing genuine effort. Her note was brief. Cleaned the Hartley mansion yesterday. Remembered cleaning your apartment when you were 23, criticizing how you lived while you paid my credit cards. The shame helps me work harder. Thank you for that gift. I filed the check with the others, all designated for the center's scholarship fund. The money meant less than the accountability it represented. Caroline at 73 had discovered what honest work felt like. The transformation came too late for our relationship, but hopefully in time for her soul. A knock interrupted my reflection. Sarah entered with the week's media requests: 3 podcasts, 2 university speaking engagements, and a congressional hearing on elder financial abuse. The story that my family had desperately wanted hidden had become a beacon for others trapped in similar dynamics. Also, Sarah added with a smile, Emma's teacher called. She won the district science fair with her butterfly migration project. The ceremony is Thursday afternoon. Pride swelled at my daughter's achievement. Emma had inherited intelligence and drive, but channeled them through joy rather than obligation. Her success came from genuine curiosity, not desperate need for approval. The center had its own victories to celebrate. Our 3rd location opened next month in Chicago, funded entirely by graduate businesses giving back. The woman who'd cleaned offices to afford community college now employed over 300 people across her commercial cleaning empire. Another graduates' tech company had just secured Series A funding. Their successes rippled outward, each achievement creating opportunities for others. Amy arrived for our weekly lunch, her financial consulting firm now occupying the floor above mine. We'd learned to be close without being codependent supportive, without sacrificing independence. She brought news from the family grapevine she still occasionally accessed through strategic contacts. Dorothy's up for parole next year, she reported. Apparently, she's been teaching literacy and expressing remorse. Her children remain divided on whether it's genuine. What do you think? I asked, curious about Amy's perception. Prison changes people, but not always in the ways we hope. She might genuinely regret the crimes, or she might just regret getting caught. Either way, she'll emerge to find her world completely altered. No fortune to steal, no family to manipulate. The news stirred little emotion. Dorothy had become a cautionary tale rather than an active threat. Her 12-year sentence would end with her releasing into a reality where her power had evaporated along with the money she'd stolen. We discussed the upcoming center expansion, Amy's wedding plans, with Marcus and Emma's growing interest in marine biology. Normal conversations between sisters who'd learned to appreciate mundane peace after extraordinary chaos. The drama that had defined our family for decades had been replaced by quiet stability. That afternoon, I visited Martha's grave, a monthly ritual that provided reflection and gratitude. Fresh flowers adorned the headstone, Emma's tradition of bringing butterflies in various forms. I sat on the bench we'd installed, updating Martha on developments she would have celebrated. The Harrison building downtown is for sale, I told her quietly. The one you always said would make a perfect community center. We have enough in reserves to purchase it, maybe create transitional housing for women leaving abusive situations. The cemetery's peace allowed for conversations I couldn't have elsewhere. Martha's spirit, whether real or imagined, provided guidance when decisions felt overwhelming. She'd played such a long game, seeing outcomes others couldn't imagine. Her legacy lived not in the millions she'd left, but in the wisdom she'd shared. Tyler appeared on the path unexpected but not unwelcome. He visited Martha's grave, weekly part of his ongoing amends. We nodded, acknowledgement sharing space without requiring interaction. His transformation over 2 years had been remarkable. Construction foreman, now respected by peers who knew nothing of his parasitic past. Jake graduates next month. he offered quietly. Summa cum laude finance degree. He's already got job offers, but he wants to work at the center first. Says he needs to give back before moving forward. He'll be welcome, I assured him. The next generation's commitment to breaking cycles provided hope that dysfunction wasn't destiny. We stood together briefly, two siblings separated by choices, but united in loss. Tyler had become what he should have always been, self-sufficient, humble, grateful for honest work. The brother who'd once demanded $48,000 annually now took pride in earning $48,000 through his own labor. That evening, Emma and I prepared dinner together in our kitchen, her chatter filling the space with lightness. She'd invited two friends for a sleepover, their parents grateful for the safe space we provided. Our home had become a haven for several children whose own families struggled with various challenges. "Mom, do you think people can totally change?" Emma asked while chopping vegetables with careful precision. "Like completely become different?" "What makes you ask?" I responded, curious about her 8-year-old philosophical moment. "Well, Grandma Caroline seems different now, and Uncle Tyler. But Madison..." She'd met my sister once at a neutral location. "Still seems angry, so maybe some people can change and others can't." "I think," I said slowly, "people can change if they really want to and work hard at it. But they have to admit they need changing first. Some people find that too scary." Emma nodded sagely. "Like butterflies. They have to go into the cocoon willing to dissolve before they can transform." Her metaphor, profound in its simplicity, captured what I'd witnessed. Family members who'd acknowledged their dissolution. Caroline, Tyler, even Jake had emerged transformed. Those clinging to old patterns remained trapped in shells of their own making. David arrived as the girls were setting up their movie night. We'd been dating for 6 months, introduced by a center graduate who thought we'd match well. A fellow entrepreneur who'd built his tech company from nothing, he understood success without needing to diminish it. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect rather than desperate need. "Brought dessert," he announced, producing a bakery box that made 3 8-year-olds squeal with delight. His easy integration into our life felt natural rather than forced. After the girls were engrossed in their film, David and I sat on the back deck watching fireflies dance in the garden. The peace felt earned, rather than accidental, each quiet moment paid for with years of difficult choices. "The Times wants to do a feature on the center," he mentioned. "Focus on how personal trauma can fuel systemic change. They specifically want to interview you about transforming family financial abuse into entrepreneurial empowerment." "I'll think about it," I said, though I already knew I'd agree. Each media opportunity meant more women recognizing their situations weren't unique or unsolvable. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Opening it revealed a message from Robert, my first contact with my father in over a year. "Benita, I know I have no right to reach out. I'm in hospice cancer stage 4. Not asking for anything, just wanted you to know I finally understand what we took from you. Your mother was right to divorce me. You were right to cut me off. I spent my life as a taker. I'm sorry it's too late to be anything else. Tell Emma her grandfather loved her even if he never learned how to show it properly." The message sat heavy in the night air. David took my hand, silently understanding some moments defied words. My father would die as he'd lived, reaching out only when facing ultimate consequences. But perhaps recognizing his failures before the end provided some redemption, if only for his own peace. I wouldn't visit. That boundary established through pain and therapy would hold. But I would tell Emma her grandfather's final message when she was older, framing it as evidence that understanding could come too late to change outcomes, but never too late to matter. The evening deepened Emma's laughter, carrying from inside where her friends painted each other's nails. This was the life I'd built from the ashes of enabling, filled with chosen love, purposeful work and boundaries that protected rather than isolated. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The center faced growing pains. Family members continued their various journeys toward or away from accountability. Emma would need guidance navigating a world that wouldn't always be as safe as the one we'd created. But tonight, surrounded by evidence of transformation, the true wealth was evident. Standing in my office one final time before bed, I opened the safe containing the family fund's original documents, the leather journal from my 20s, filled with naive hope that loans would be repaid, bank statements showing years of one-way flow, the group message that started the avalanche, printed and laminated as a reminder. These papers, once sources of pain, had become archaeological evidence of a life transformed. The family fund was truly dead, but from its death had grown something magnificent, hundreds of women building businesses, children seeing mothers' valued cycles broken through conscious choice. The money my family had taken could never be recovered. The years of emotional abuse couldn't be undone. But the strength built through surviving their exploitation had become the foundation for others' freedom. That was the true wealth, not the millions accumulated or stolen, but the lives changed through sharing my story and resources. As I locked the safe, my reflection caught in the office mirror. The woman staring back looked nothing like the people-pleaser who'd hidden success to avoid threatening others. This woman owned her achievements, set boundaries without apology, and understood that real family wasn't about blood or obligation, but about mutual respect and chosen connection. The group message that demanded I step away had ultimately been a gift. By following their instructions, literally stepping away from the fund and the dysfunction it enabled, I'd stepped into my full power. Their rejection became my liberation. Their greed catalyzed my generosity toward those who truly deserved support. The family fund was gone, but in its place stood something eternal, the knowledge that worth isn't determined by what you provide, but by who you are. That truth learned through pain but proven through triumph would outlive any bank account. It would pass to Emma and every woman who walked through the center's doors, a legacy of transformation that began with refusing to be diminished. The true wealth wasn't money. It never had been. It was the freedom to choose yourself, the courage to demand respect, and the joy of building something beautiful from the ruins of others' greed. That wealth, unlike the family fund, could never be taken, only shared, multiplied, and passed on to those ready to claim their own worth. Standing in my home built with my success, filled with chosen family's love, and echoing with my daughter's laughter, I finally understood what Martha had seen all along. The best revenge against those who tried to make you small wasn't anger or retribution. It was becoming exactly who you were meant to be and helping others do the same. The story that began with a cruel message telling me to step away had ended with me stepping forward into a life beyond their limited imagination. And that transformation from fun to freedom, from enabling to empowering, from hidden to celebrated, was the greatest wealth of all. If you've experienced family financial abuse or watched loved ones struggle with similar dynamics, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. How do you maintain boundaries while still showing compassion? What helped you recognize your worth beyond what you could provide? Please share your stories. They help others realize they're not alone in these challenging situations. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by their family's opinions could make all the difference in their journey toward freedom. Thank you for joining me in Benita's transformation. May you always remember that your true wealth lies not in what others take from you, but in who you choose to become despite their limitations. Wishing you the courage to step into your own power and the wisdom to build your life on your own terms.